Hi, everyone. I am CBR lead editor Megan DeMore, and I am here with Ed Solomon and Chris Matheson, the writers of Bill and Ted's Excellent Adventure, Bill and Ted's Bogus Journey, and now Bill and Ted Face the Music, which has arrived almost 30 years after the original film, which begs the question, why now? Tell me a little bit about how the movie came together and sort of why this ended up being the time.
Well, after Bogus Journey came out in 1991, I think all of us involved thought that was pretty much it. There was really no sense that we were going to make a third one. And I don't recall Ed and I talking about it at all, really, for a decade. It just was not going to happen. It must be that somewhere around 2003, 2004, we just started talking, but which I guess gets at, well, we love Bill and Ted, and we just were almost internally wondering, where would they be now? Who are they? You know, because they were meaningful characters to us. So we started talking about it, and I think the core ideas of this thing we sort of felt pretty quickly, thematically, and in 2008, we got together with Alex and Keanu. So years back, I mean, really not much between 2004 and 2008, but in 2008, we had dinner with Alex and Keanu at Alex's house. And the purpose being, would you guys be interested in pursuing this? And I think maybe for the first time, they were sort of interested. And the basic idea that we presented of what had happened, that it hadn't worked out in our minds. It hadn't worked out, that basically they were told something when they were 17 years old and they're 50 and it hasn't happened. And what's that been like? How does that feel? What does that do to your inner life? What does that do to your marriage? What does that do to you? How do you live with that? And they found that interesting and we found that interesting. And so, but we didn't have the plot yet. We didn't have the story yet. So then we got to work on the plot. And by 2010, we had a version that they said, yeah, you know, that's pretty interesting. And it was basically the version of like, why don't we time travel? We know there's going to be a song. Why don't we go into the future and steal it from ourselves and get it that way? That visiting different future versions of themselves would be kind of the core of the story. And so we had the idea by 10. We wrote it in 10. Ed and I wrote a draft in 10. Alex and Keanu had their thoughts, and we did a pretty big revision in 11, and then we went out with it and then kind of hit a resounding lack of interest. And I remember Keanu saying at one point, it was like, I'm not going to imitate Keanu. Maybe I will imitate Keanu. He was like, it's a very cold splash of water in the face. And it was, you know, it was like, wow, we thought people were going to be really interested in doing it. And they just weren't, and so it took a while.
Every studio passed on it multiple times. We took it everywhere. We tried to get it made independently. We tried to get it made through the system. Nobody wanted it. Right. Time and time again, we rewrote it. People didn't want it. People didn't seem to think it was commercial. A lot of people wanted to do a reboot of Bill and Ted with like new young Bill and Ted. But we wanted to follow the Alex and Keanu Bill and Ted story through to its completion. And finally, just somehow magically almost, things shifted and we got to do it. And I'm really glad we did.
You know, I saw the movie last night and I came away from it and I was like, man, it's so refreshing to have a movie that's not cynical. Like, I feel like, especially in this day and age, in this political climate, there's a lot of doom and gloom. And that is just, this movie is the polar opposite of that. So how did you arrive at that sort of tone and message?
I don't think Chris and I in life are as uncynical as Bill and Ted are. I think that's a fairly safe thing to say. But Bill and Ted have never been cynical, and we never wanted the movie to be snarky, cynical, mean. And we also were aware, when we first started going out with the movie 10 years ago, it was very much against the kinds of comedies that were being made then. Comedy, especially 10 years ago, was really cynical, really meta, really snarky. I'm very proud of the fact that Bill and Ted is, I'm going to use a word I would never use to describe something I work on, and I would rarely use in a positive way. It's wholesome. It's from the heart, and it's uncynical. And I think that emerges really out of the characters of Bill and Ted, not just as Chris and I imagine them, but also as Alex and Keanu embody them. I can't imagine a cynical Bill and Ted movie. It doesn't make any sense to me.
Yeah, it's also, I mean, it does emerge from, it emerges from Bill and Ted. It's just who these guys are, and a lot of it has to do with their worldview, which is, you know, more aspirational for us than it is actual. But it also comes, you know, they've been our collaborators for a very long time, Alex and Keanu. And I can remember a couple of occasions in this, in Face the Music, where they basically, anytime Bill and Ted do anything mean, anytime they lie for any reason, it would be like, and because Ed and I, we would try that out. We would write that they would, and they would say, no, they just wouldn't. They just wouldn't lie. They just wouldn't lie. And, you know, and so we'd look at it and we'd kind of go, maybe we thought we'd written a little scene that hinged on that and was amusing or something, but they were right. And so then we'd take that out and we'd swap it in with something where they just kind of tell the truth. And it worked better. Also, the director, Dean Pariseau, is a very human guy. And he consistently, so much of the tone that you feel in the movie comes from Dean's deep humanism. This guy likes other people. He's pretty big-hearted. And that, you know, that always matters. The director matters a lot, and his direction of this is really essential.
So obviously this film is bigger than Bill and Ted because we have Billy and Thea. And I'm interested in sort of the way that you developed them, because obviously they take after their fathers to a great degree, but they're also very distinct individual characters on their own right. So tell me a little bit about how Billy and Thea came to be.
Well, you know, when we wrote Bogus Journey in '91, Little Bill and Little Ted are on their backs at the end of the movie, and Little Bill and Little Ted, and in my mind, I think in Ed's mind, they were sons. I mean, it was just like, well, right, of course they are, because that's where we were at that point in life. And then we started writing this thing in 2010. We scripted our first draft is 10, and they were sons. We wrote Will and Theo for several drafts. And it just never really worked. It just never was really like, because they were either like little carbon copies of their dads, you know, they're just like Bill and Ted again at 16 or 18. And we didn't like that because that just didn't feel funny or cool. Or they were cool guys. They were like kind of little hipstery guys. And we just could not seem to find the comedy in that. And so at a certain point, we thought, well, why don't we try making them daughters? And we did that. And very quickly, it made the script work a lot better. It made the story work a lot better. It made the characters work better. It made the relationships, you know, between parent and child more interesting, more alive. And, you know, I would say Ed and I have daughters, and we do have daughters. That's true. We also have sons. So it's not like, well, we couldn't make the sons work because, you know, something about our sons or something. But our daughters are, I don't know. I don't know exactly how that happened, but they certainly worked better as daughters, and their voices instantly seemed more interesting and more specific to us.
Yeah, we were banging our heads against the wall, and it wasn't feeling right. The script was not feeling right with Bill and Ted's kids being Will and Theo. And I think that you said, I think it was you, said, we should try it. What if we did it this way? And what if we made them daughters? And we went, right, what if we did? And we fleshed it out that way. And I just think the whole movie has a different feel because of that, honestly. I'm really glad we did it that way. And Sam and Bridget are wonderful. And you asked, how do we differentiate the voices? How did that come about? We knew that any iteration, whether sons or daughters, that were too Bill and Ted like would feel derivative, and we didn't want to do that. When we realized that the girls had encyclopedic knowledge of music, and whereas Bill and Ted knew nothing about the people they were interacting with, Billy and Thea would know everything about the people they were interacting with. In fact, stuff that these people didn't even know about themselves. That also opened up for a kind of forward movingness to the characters. Bill and Ted as characters have a forward movingness, to make up a phrase, that's based on their spirit, their ebullience, and that you can basically put Bill and Ted anywhere and they'll just go forward. Their daughters have that same quality, which makes them fun to write, and I wouldn't say easy to write, but easier to write. But they're not ignorant. They're brilliant, and they're very capable and very competent, which was fresher for us, I think, too.
Yeah, they're like really, really good mirrors, because they show up in front of these other characters and they say, and they're right, pretty much, usually, like, this is what you're doing, this is amazing what you're doing, and then they'll articulate, like, the thing that the person is doing, and it's like they see a lot. They have really good ears. They hear stuff, they see stuff, they get stuff about music in particular, but I think you could say about life, too.
So, I mean, between Kelly even and Billy and Thea, I feel like this movie had a lot to say about not only family legacy, but like engaging with the things that you love, because I feel like that was so embodied in Billy and Thea, just loving music and knowing so much about it. What do you hope audiences take away from that?
Well, you just said it pretty well. Actually, that's not bad. Can we just say that?
Just say we said what you said.
Yeah, I mean, do what you love, engage with what you love, pursue that which you love, and then the larger meaning of it is like, and play with others. Play with others. Play is with. I mean, and the more we can play together, the better off we'll all be.
Bill and Ted were happiest when they were playing because they loved it, and when they started playing because they were told they had to, or because they were told it would have meaning beyond them, it crushed them. And I think the girls, their daughters, they love what they're doing. And for me, in a lot of ways, this movie is about Bill and Ted rediscovering what is meaningful to them as people, as human beings, and what do they really love again. And I mean, mostly, what do I hope people come away from this movie with? 90 minutes of smiles and 90 minutes of diversion from the messed up world we're in, and maybe a sense that hey, that was fun, we had a good time, and that made us feel good a little. At the end of the day, it's just a movie. It's just a silly, somewhat absurd movie that was written from the heart, I think, and made without cynicism, and I hope people can feel that in the film.
So, okay, it looks like I have one more question that I can ask and wrap up on. So I want to talk a little bit about the ensemble, because we got a lot of historical characters, and honestly, they were so much more diverse than we had in either of the other two films. And I was wondering why that was important for you to show this time around. And I need to tack this on because Dennis was my favorite character in this this movie, and I need to know about him as well. So if I can throw that on him as well.
Yeah, Anthony Carrigan is just unbelievably funny.
He's brilliant. He is brilliant.
And Ed and I, we just love insecure villains, man. There's just nothing more fun from a comedy writer standpoint. Deeply insecure. This guy kills every other character in the movie. He murders everybody, and yet he's pathetically insecure, and you feel sorry for him. And boy, Anthony's funny as hell. Yeah, I mean, the diversity thing, we had an awareness of that. We wanted to, I mean, we're talking about music here, right? So it's like, seems kind of important and meaningful that like Black artists are going to be pretty important in a story like that, and they are.
And when we did the first, I'm sorry, Chris, I didn't mean to cut you off. Sorry.
There was an awareness of that, it wasn't like the main thing driving us, but it was there.
When we wrote the first movie, we were essentially adolescent boys, and the fantasy of the movie is an adolescent boy's fantasy. Your rock band will save the world, and you'll end up with princess babes that'll go to the prom with you. And I think the first two movies reflect a kind of, immaturity. It was where we were in our life, and 30 years pass, and the world changes, and we change, and this movie gave us an opportunity to expand the ensemble and expand the feelings of the movie and open it up. And yeah, we were very aware of that. Some of it was conscious for sure, and some of it was just natural because, as Chris said, it's about music and it's just the natural way to go.
Right, so it looks like that's all I have time for. I want to say thank you. And just real quick before I go, my dad showed me Bill and Ted's Most Excellent Adventure when I was a kid. And I would like take it to sleepovers. This is probably not what you intended that movie to be. Teenage girls watching it at sleepovers. But man, I'm so excited that you waited 30 years for this movie so that I can go show my dad this movie.
Oh, that's very moving. I really appreciate hearing that. Thank you.
That's great, Megan. Thank you.